Hello and welcome. My name is Stephanie Adams and I will be the host for this TLC session. Thank you for joining us for Bridging Academic Theory and Business Practice, the Future of Micro-Entrepreneurship in Kenya, the Millennial Woman. Please welcome Dr. Jonas Ardenberg, National Director of Nonprofit Organization of the Human Promise, Kenya, and Ms. Sheila Waswa, CEO and owner of Chasing Mavericks, Ltd. in Nairobi, Kenya. Take it away.
Thank you, Stephanie, and welcome everyone. And Sheila, thank you so very much for taking the time to be here. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Jonas. How are you?
Good. I am currently in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Sheila is actually in Nairobi, Kenya. And the main emphasis today is bridging the gap between academic theory and practice. Often as professors and academics, we drown in theory, but what we talk about, how does it actually relate to reality? And I've been to Kenya several times. I do nonprofit work in Kenya. I had the chance of meeting Sheila a few years ago, and I witnessed that in Kenya, most of the entrepreneurs are young women like Sheila. And I thought that, so today, bridging academic theory of entrepreneurship and what Sheila is doing, just to kind of identify entrepreneurship. I didn't want to list a bunch of sources, but just some seminal works is Knight, 1921, and Schumpeter of 1934 to establish some of the seminal works. And if you look at the quote by Mr. Schumpeter, the function of entrepreneurs is to reform or revolutionize the pattern of production, exploiting an invention, also proposing new commodities and doing things in a new way. And I think this is very relevant to Kenya and the Millennial Woman, and also what Sheila is doing today. It's a way of looking at new things, creating something new. And even if Schumpeter were focused on production, entrepreneurship in the informational age and today is very, very relevant. So, but Sheila, thank you so much for being with us. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Chasing Mavericks and what you do?
All right, thank you so much, Jonas, for having me. My name is Sheila Waswa. I come from Kenya. Kenya is on the eastern side of Africa. We say it's the motherland of the former US President Obama. Or if others know, it's also the motherland of Lupita Nyong'o, one of US-based renowned actresses. And right now, it's also the motherland of the sub-2-hour marathoner, Eliud Kipchoge. So I come from Kenya. I'm a graduate with a bachelor's degree in communication and journalism from Kenya. I'd like to call myself a self-acclaimed poverty eradication ambassador. I'm also a culture and arts criticist. Apart from that, I own Chasing Mavericks. Chasing Mavericks is a consultancy on corporate communication, capacity building, and event management. So basically, that is what we do. We've been on for around 2 years, since 2017 up to now. I've had a bit of experience and expertise in that industry, especially as far as capacity building and events management is concerned. In Kenya, we've organized national and international events, mostly summits, conferences, and also awards. Thank you, Jonas.
Well, thank you, Sheila. And when you look at your conferences that you do, what are the topics of the conferences?
Well, we try to diversify as much as possible, so we are comprehensive. So from some of them, at first we started with a lot of youth conferences. So we were doing a lot of young professionals networking forums. We did a series of forums called Africa Now. And basically we were discussing issues that are facing the African man, in this case, the Kenyan man, but we are trying to bring in an aspect of Africanism by bringing in some people who are not in Kenya. So we're discussing issues like the impact of China trade in Kenya, the impact of poor leadership in Kenya and by extension in Africa. So basically it has been around knowledge-based, if I will say, knowledge-based conferences and summits. But we've also done others on basically promoting humanity, because I've had a privilege of, again, working with a number of NGOs and the umbrella of NGO in Kenya here. So we've done a number of, again, conferences and summits that aim at promoting goodness in the society and humanity in the society.
Okay, well, thank you. What inspired you to be an entrepreneur? Why did you want to start a business?
Well, it's an interesting story. I think for the longest time, I'd always wanted to be employed to work at the United Nations. And that was really my dream from the very start. But during my internship, I met an old stranger. I like to call him that. He was an old stranger. And every day he used to come to the office, he used to ask me, Sheila, what have you done today to add value in your life? I didn't understand the meaning of that question for the longest time. Because, you know, when you're asked, what did you do today to add value in your life? The first thing you think about is you sent emails, you spoke to who you're supposed to speak to, and you performed your work to the best that you could to impress your employer. But after a while, I realized that what he actually meant is what I was doing to add value in my life, not in my employer's life. So I found meaning in entrepreneurship as a way of adding value in my life. At first, it was just that, but after a while, I think it transpired into something bigger, because most of the things that I've done have been out of passion. Through entrepreneurship, I've realized that I can actually be able to foster poverty eradication in the society. And from my end, it's basically through connecting people to knowledge. As I had mentioned earlier, through the forums that I've been doing, the summits that we do, most of the time is just to make sure that people are impacted with knowledge so that they can be able to either change their lives or change their mindset to make better decisions that can affect them positively.
Okay, thank you. And related to this following questions, you know, when I'm in Nairobi or when I went out to Bungoma or Meru or Kilifi, I noticed that there's so many young women entrepreneurs everywhere. They're working very, very hard. And compared to, I'm not saying that young women in Kenya work harder than American young women, but if you see the conditions and the opportunities or lack of opportunities, they're very strong. They're very, very strong, and they're very stubborn, and they don't want to give up. And I admire that. And that's related to this question. Why do you think there's so many young women entrepreneurs in Kenya?
Well, Jonas, I'll tell you, I was doing some research, and I saw by 1999 that 47.7% of entrepreneurs in mid-sized enterprises in Kenya were actually women. I was surprised because I thought for a long time this will be a men's field. But I realized that it's mostly situational. And that applies in the rural and in the urban setup. Because our men might not be as much advanced. They say you empower a woman, you empower a family, and you empower a nation. Because for us, a woman is the one who will always take care of the family. So when a man is lagging behind, or they have gone out and they're not working hard enough in their urban setup, that is, then a woman will actually have to take up something. So I'd say one of the reasons is because of unemployment. The rates are really high. And right now, everyone is being advised that because we don't have jobs, then we have to create jobs. So women have to actually find a way. They're getting empowered each and every day. So it's also for them, you know, the answer will actually be why not, right? Because just as men, I think they're becoming entrepreneurial each and every day. The other thing will be that we're also having programs and people who are supporting women entrepreneurs a lot. And the Crusaders are saying women should pick up from where men are, or from where men left. Men are becoming more irresponsible with time. And therefore, women just have to take up the slack. they handle and, you know, take care of themselves. Because,
Okay, well, thank you. And you know, in a sense, Kenya is very traditional in the sense of the husband and wife relationship. And that's part of a different topic we're going to cover a little bit later. But just for the audience, the women in Kenya have a certain role, and that's based on you know, heritage and tribe and things like that. But you kind of answered this question already. But what do you know, what are some of the challenges with being an entrepreneur for a young woman?
all right. I think now one of them is what you're actually talking about, the cultural barriers, because for a long time, I think Kenya, in terms of Kenya specifically, we're becoming more westernized, but we are not yet there. So we are still very cultural bound in terms of when it comes to a marriage setup, for instance, a man will provide and a woman will do the house chores. That is a bit normal. So then it means one of the challenges would be that a woman will actually have less time to concentrate on their jobs or the entrepreneurial ventures, because they have to take care of their family, which for most of us who know, taking care of children, taking care of house chores is quite a bit of work, and it's very tasking. So that will be one of the things. But the other thing is that the challenges that women face as entrepreneurs in Kenya is basically almost the same as the challenges that women face in the corporate sectors. Basically the same. The fact that you're a woman, you might not be treated with the respect that you deserve. You might act to behave manly in some cases for you to actually be seen like you have authority and you have power. You might have to pick up some characters that are manly. That's the other thing. And to show there's that extra mile that as a woman you just have to go, which is not very common with men. For men, I think they get the respect firsthand. You know, as a man, you walk in there, you say, "Hi, hello, my name is Jonas." You're already treated well. But I think for women, it's a bit hard. After saying my name is Sheila, I still have to prove that I can do the job. And on top of that, you might get some investors or clients asking for something extra. You know, a woman is a woman. So it's I think an interesting phenomenon.
Now, and this question is not included, but can you share your experience that you had earlier last week? You were talking to someone?
Yes. So we're organizing the Kenya Beauty and Cosmetics Awards. So I had a meeting last week with a beauty college, because beauty colleges are part of the categories that we're actually working within the awards. And after I explained what the awards is about and all that, now during my presentation, the lady, now the marketing manager, she was a lady. She asked, whose brainchild is this? Ideally, who is organizing this event? So I said, well, mine. She asked, how long has the company been existing? I said 3 years. But you know, you have to explain that you've done other events, so you have expertise in that field and all that. Then she went on to ask, are you Kenyan? I said, yes, I am. She asked, born and bred? I said, yes. Schooled in Kenya, or you've been schooled outside for a while? I said, no, I've schooled in Kenya. So from there I got a certain stereotype that it might not necessarily apply for women, but I think it's actually something that affects women too. And she was also concerned about my age, lest I forget that for a woman, there is still that stereotype. Ideally, the situation should be that as long as you're qualified, no matter your age, you know what you're doing and you can do it to the best of your knowledge, you can get a job or you can get a deal sealed. But there is still that stereotype that you must be of a certain age And if you're smart, you must be schooled outside the country, you know. And I felt like that is something, because this marketing manager was not very old. So she's still very young. She looks like late 20s to early 30s. So it's a stereotype that is so inbred in us, even in our young people, that changing it might take a while. And I could imagine what all the other entrepreneurs go through. Now, as I was telling you the other time, for myself, every time I go out for a meeting, I have to try to look older than I am to actually be taken serious. You know, wear a wig, put on something that will make me look older. And I think it's a tragedy. It's a phase that by now I would expect we have gone through, but we haven't.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I do appreciate you sharing that experience, because I know you felt strongly about that experience, and you shared that
Yes,
with me.
I did. I did.
Moving down to question 5, do you know of any government programs that support women entrepreneurship in Kenya?
Well, I only know of one, but there's another one which is by extension. So we have something called the Women Enterprise Fund. It was launched in 2007 under the Ministry of Youth and Gender Affairs. We have that ministry in the country. So basically what they do is they give loans to women groups, that is women groups, who want to start a business. So it has been there for a while, but you know, one thing with funds from the government could be that it has corruption and all that. So even in terms of allocating the funds themselves, it might not be to very deserving groups. But by extension, if you're a woman who is a youth, and for Kenya, the cap rate for youth is 40 years. So that's a lot. We also have the Youth Enterprise Fund, which is again given to groups as a loan. So what these funds basically do is they give you the loans. They can do market linkages for your groups or for your businesses, and they also do capacity building. So that has been helpful, I would say, for a while, but the NGOs are doing a bit of a better job in terms of that, because there are a lot of NGOs in Kenya, starting from the UNDP to corporates like Coca-Cola, that have just come up to fund women businesses. You'll find that most of these women businesses are small and mid-size, basically what we call in Kenya Jua Kali. Jua Kali means it's not done by someone who is very learned. It could be things like making jikos. Jikos are materials where you put charcoal and then you can cook with. I'm trying to explain for the audience to just understand. So it's a bit informal. It's actually the informal businesses. So most of which is funded by these NGOs and these corporate sectors. So it would be informal. It could be agriculture. But I think that there's been some bit of improvement, because the major problem used to be capital. So these funds, in one or another, are helping out for those who get it. A lot of women will tell you they don't.
No, thank you. Thank you. I did some research on this too, and you know, the Entrepreneurship Fund, I'm not sure how effective it is right now based on the research I did. I often see programs started in Kenya and everybody is excited, but after a few years, the money is not available based on corruption, or they're used for something else. And
it's very common.
And so also a lot of the NGOs have really, really good programs for entrepreneurship, but it doesn't really help the micro entrepreneur, someone like you, in the sense that you are just a young woman who want to start a business. You know, those resources are not really there for you or for other women. You have to be kind of a part of a group, and you also know this, it's a lot of politics behind it, right?
True.
You have to know somebody, but thank you for sharing those insights. And I know we have to move forward here, but if you compare entrepreneurship for a young woman in rural Kenya versus urban Kenya, what do you think? What is your opinion on those opportunities?
Well, I think there are more opportunities in the urban setup than the rural setup. And one reason would be knowledge, you know, in terms of just what is the knowledge base of the women who live in the rural areas. You'll get that in terms of exposure, attitude, and also just their mindset. For the people in the rural areas, they'll be thinking local, a bit of local. So most of the entrepreneurship opportunities there might be farming, you know, or farming and selling the farm produce. That could be most of it, and then a bit of the informal sector. Well, in the urban setup, there's a lot of opportunities, and that's why if you're in Kenya and you spoke to a few of the Kenyans, they'll tell you, I was in the village, and once I finished school, I came to Nairobi, because Nairobi is the land of opportunities. You know, that is where they expect to actually find opportunities. So you'll get a lot of things, and it's a bit open because women can invest in as much of the industries as possible. As much as women have been known to invest in certain industries, you know, like the service industry, that's where a lot of women are. But women right now are diversifying in the urban setup, so they have the knowledge. That is one. They've explored a lot of things. They also have access to mentors, because they can actually get to meet people who've done bigger things, and they want to do the same things, as opposed to that person who is in the rural setup and has only met a chief, area administrator, or the few people who come to the village on weekends from town. So I think the opportunities are better in the urban setup, and that is basically because of diversification. And also market, you know, Jonas, because for instance, if it's an app, okay, now a good example, you want to develop a version of an Uber. Right now we have some in Kenya. We have like Wasili. Wasili is a Kenyan version of an Uber. Doing that in the village might be very hard because there is no market to start with. People will prefer to walk for as long as possible than to take a taxi. So I think there are those issues of market, of capital, of knowledge, and that makes it harder for the people in the rural areas.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's important to, and many will not real understand, there's a big difference between the village thinking or the urban thinking in Kenya. You know, when you're in the village, you're with family, you're with tradition, you function within the family, and you have your role. But, you know, when you go to Kenya or when you go to Nairobi, it's different. You know, it's an international city. And it's funny that you mentioned that, you know, you prefer to walk. You remember when we visited the orphanage up in Kasarani?
Yes.
I saw a gentleman run from Nairobi to Kasarani. And that's a 45-minute drive. And the
That's
gentleman,
a runner.
yeah, he decided to run.
Yes.
So, you know, the market, the basic infrastructure is very relevant. So that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. And going into tribal heritage, you know, Kenya became independent in December 12th, 1963 from Great Britain. And after that, at this point, Kenya has 44 tribes. Tell us a little bit about tribe and tribalism, and also the opportunities for women of different tribes.
All right. I think I'd say there's tribalism in Kenya, but it's very subtle. It's very subtle means that we live in peace as long as there are no elections. Because now what happens is our elections are strongly based on the dominance of tribes. So we'll have the major tribes that are known to give presidents. Like, for instance, we have the Kikuyu tribe in Kenya, the Kalenjin tribe in Kenya. So for the past 4 years, we've had 3 Kikuyu presidents and 1 Kalenjin president. And there is the notion that if you have a president from your community, we call them communities now, I hear that's a fancy word. If you have a president from your community, it means that your area will be a bit developed than the rest of the places. Your region will be a bit developed. And that's why it's always very important for people. It's thought to be important, I'll put that in quotes, for people to vote along tribal lines. Because you vote a president from your community, then your community will get the benefits of development. So ideally what happens is, by extension then, that even government appointments will again go to the members of that community. So let me give an example. For instance, a member of a certain community is the head of the board of the Women Enterprise Fund. It means then that women from that community, if they come applying for that fund, the possibility of getting the funds is higher than a woman from any other community. So it affects us in a bit of a big way in terms of that. If you're going to a parastatal, for instance, and you want business, and the head of that parastatal comes from a certain community, it's known notion that high chances are, if you come from the same community, you are likely to get whatever job or whatever deed you'd want from that parastatal. So I think tribe is plays a very major part in Kenya, especially in terms of entrepreneurship and just all that. Then the other thing is that for a long time, we've had a notion of a certain community being the better ones in entrepreneurship. The Kikuyu community, I'm sure you know this, right?
Yes, I do.
So so ideally what happens, it could be, I'm not sure. This is something that can be open for research from the academics like yourself. But a majority of businesses, I could confirm, a majority of businesses, it's true, are owned by people from the Kikuyu community. And so ideally, they are known to be some bit of experts. You know, we have communities like the Luo, who the stereotype is, once they get money, they'll think of dressing up, buying luxuries, buying big vehicles, but not investing. We have stereotypes like the Luyas, once they get money, they'll think of eating, you know. So the Kikuyus, the stereotype is that one, they really know how to use money, they really know how to save, and they really know how to invest. So what happens is that generally people will prefer to work with a Kikuyu when it comes to business. The other negative stereotype about it is that they cannot be trusted. But if it comes to business, because they'll make proper business decisions, you'll definitely want to work with them. So I think those are some of the dynamics when it comes to tribe and just how it affects either entrepreneurship or business in general in the country.
Okay, well, thank you. And going back, and I do appreciate that thorough review. And based on the Kikuyu tradition and also their view of women, I think that the Kikuyu tribe or community are more welcoming of the woman being an entrepreneur. I think that
definitely.
Yeah.
I think they've a bit of pushed their women out, because a lot of women entrepreneurs in Kenya, Kikuyus, definitely. I think how they were raised really comes into play. You know, a man was raised almost as equally as a woman. And that's why you'll also get that some people will prefer to marry Kikuyu women specifically for that, to push them in business, because they know their families will be taken care of.
Well, thank you. And I know we're running out of time here. So I'm going to kind of combine the last two questions. Why do you think you have been successful? And like I've asked you many times, where do you think you're going to be in the next 3 to 5 years?
All right. Why I've been successful so far, I think one is just passion. You know, if you love what you're doing and you do it with all your heart and with the commitment that it deserves, that will make it to be pushed from one level to another. That's how you go from. And how I was successful to start my business, I'll say one of the most important things really was that at the time I had capital. I think if I didn't, and this is are lacking for most entrepreneurs. A lot of people have a lot of ideas, but if they don't have the money to start, it becomes a bit hard. And I know there's a notion from motivational speakers that people keep saying, hey, just start with whatever amount you have, you know, even if you have $10, start. It is important to say that, but I think there are a lot of things that will be constrained if you don't have money. So that was a bit easier for me because I had the capital. It was easy to start. What has sustained me would be the passion and the commitment. And I've had a great team. I've been working with a lot of great people and a lot of great mentors. In the next 3 to 5 years as a business owner, I think, and as I was talking to you before, I'm still trying to get really my line, because right now I've really diversified and our type of services are a bit comprehensive. So we've not really stuck to one line in terms of, do you want to do specific events? Do you want to do corporate communication or capacity building? So that is one thing that along the way, I think we'll be able to figure out. But for me, for the next 3 to 5 years, you know, as I said, one of my goals was on poverty eradication. So I think I'd want to create as many forums as possible that can just connect people to knowledge. And this knowledge should be one that can transform their mindset towards earning a living. That is my way of doing it. And the other thing would be that I do want to create as much employment in my company as possible. So even from next year, I'm trying to expand it a little bit to have more events as often as possible so that I can get more employees on board.
Okay. Well, Sheila, thank you so very much for your time. I know it's late in Nairobi right now. I do genuinely appreciate it. And I know we'll talk later this week, but Sheila mentioned some very famous Kenyans in the beginning, but she forgot to mention one of my favorites, Wangari Maathai.
Wangari Maathai.
Wangari Maathai
I
she won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004, and I actually had the opportunity to speak at the Wangari Maathai Peace Institute in Nairobi not long ago. So if you have a moment, Google Wangari Maathai. So thank you, Sheila, so much. Thank you.
Thank you too for having me.
You did great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you both very much for the very informative presentation, and everyone for attending. I just wanted to say one thing from John. He said community can be a good word because many times Western civilization uses the term tribe as representing an uncivilized people. I share this as an indigenous person myself. So I just wanted to share that.
No, thank you. And John, thank you for the input and thank you for attending. I think that's a very good observation. Very relevant.
And thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day and night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.